Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this huge, gigantic knife right here. This is the Spyderco McBee. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Spyderco for sending this little guy along. They provided this directly to me as a review sample in exchange. I just promised to, when I'm done with it, do some kind of a charitable work with it. Give it out to a charity or a first responder, something along those lines. So that's great. That's win-win for me. But I've done my best not to let that affect the nature of my review here, and also we have to assume this is the best quality controlled one ever. But either way, thanks Spyderco for that. And let's do a size comparison, because this is not a gigantic knife particularly. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica, which is made to look like a gigantic knife next to your McBee here. Here it is against the Ontario Rat #1, which... Yeah, the entire knife can basically fit within the blade of the Rat 1 here. And here it is against your Rat #2. And then we'll do a couple of other size comparisons, because really the size is very notable here. That's your Rat 2 there. Let's go ahead and put this guy up against the Spyderco Dragonfly, which is getting to be a smaller knife in Spyderco's lineup, both in terms of overall proportions as well as in blade length. Here it is against the Spyderco, this I believe to be the Ladybug and the Man Bug. Here, I'll swap these two around. So you can see in terms of sharpened length, we're very similar to the Man Bug Ladybug set here. And overall dimensionality, particularly with the Man Bug, is not so far off. But there you go. Here it is against a little tiny Swiss Army knife sort of an affair. And so you can see here that blade length-wise, you're in the same vicinity. And anything else here I need to do? Oh, what the heck. Here's a knife it kind of reminds me a fair amount of in terms of your overall finishing and whatnot. And that is the Spyderco Sleece Bowie. And so you can see here they are slightly different in terms of overall size. Next thing to note on this guy, this is a Jonathan McNees design. It is based off of his custom called the Killer Bee, and they've changed it into the McBee, which I really like as a name because it's Jonathan McNees, Killer Bee, McBee. Oh yeah, that's pretty excellent. But you can see if you look at the custom that they've actually stayed fairly true to the custom, including things like this little dimpling area here. And, you know, no argument there. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very little guy right here. So on the good side, to start with, this is actually very well made. This is made at Spyderco's Taichung, Taiwan plant, and Taichung does some of Spyderco's best work. And this is no exception. It would be very easy for them to treat this as sort of a throwaway knife of just like, oh, well, hey, we'll throw some Teflon on there. Oh, hey, let's go ahead and, you know, we'll use steel for the line. You know, they could have treated this, but this is really made to the same quality, honestly, as something like the Sleece Bowie is. Actually, this is all metal, no G10 at all. But you can see there are nice details there. Like, for instance, you have a nice reflective blade finish on both of these guys, which is very nice, and honestly really adds something to this guy. I mean, really, this feels like every bit a high-end knife. It just happens to be very small, and I like that a lot. One other consequence of this being a very small knife is that it has a very smooth action. Even from just carrying it a small amount here after doing a, you know, maybe 4 days or so, after doing the disassembly and whatnot, it is smoothed way out. This is a super smooth action. There's no real complaint there. There's a little tiny bit of lock stick, but, I mean, the action on it is overall pretty excellent. And by the way, speaking of the action, this is one-handable, so you can grab it here, and then at least with my relatively small hands, get your thumb out there, and you can similarly close it with one hand. Actually, the way I found myself opening this more often, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this under a camera, is to grab onto the blade, there we go, and kind of flick it out like that, and that ends up being very fast, and it requires relatively little fine motor skill to do it. You just get it back into your hand there and you're good to go. And so I like very much the fact that this is both a satisfying thumb opener if you're trying to go slow, and you've got that secondary option there, which I think is kind of neat. I mean, and mind you, you can do that with a lot of Spydercos, but it just doesn't make as much sense to do it on the Spidey Chef as it does on something like this. So, there you go. By the way, size comparison, Spidey Chef. This thing's freaking tiny. There you go. Next thing, they've got a couple of nice little details on here. I mean, in addition to, you know, all the proper chamfering and whatnot, this really feels like it's out of the same vein as something like the Techno and whatnot. But they've got this little dimpling pattern everywhere, and it is right here on the pivot. It's here on the inside of the lock bar Well, lock bar opening cutout, lock bar, I mean, either way, whatever you want to call it, inside the lock bar relief under there, as well as under the clip, which is kind of neat. I mean, it's a nice little pattern, and it's something that I've seen on some of the Killer Bee customs. So, you know what? It's kind of neat. It's a nice detail, and it's something they could have skipped, but they didn't, so that's good. Next thing, this is a great blade. Not only did I highlight the mirror polish on it, but it actually cuts well, too, because you can see here it is a relatively thin grind. I mean, is it the thinnest behind the edge that Spyderco's ever made? No, not particularly, and with stock as thick as this is, and without the full flat grind sort of affair, yeah, it's not like God's gift to slicing, but it's a weird little knife, and I think it's okay. The blade steel on this guy is CTS XHP, and it's very efficiently shaped. I mean, a Warncliffe blade is very nice, and it comes to a relatively thin edge. I think I already said that, but either way, I mean, overall using this guy was not bad at all. It does absolutely cut, and so that's good. And so I like this blade overall. I think that for the shape and the size of this knife, it's actually pretty well designed for a lot of things. You even got a little bit of tip if you need to make a poking cut, although, again, this is really best suited as a sort of a cutter in this kind of sense. And by the way, it's worth noting that the ergonomics on this knife are, I like them a lot. So not only do you get this kind of a grip if you need it, and with me, I've got a 2-finger grip. It may even be one if you like Hellboy or something, but you've got a pretty reliable 2-finger grip, and that works well with this thumb area on the top here. But the grip that really makes a lot of sense is this one here, where you've got, and here you've actually got effectively 3 fingers, because you've got this guy down here, you've got this guy over here, you've got your thumb and your and your middle finger holding it carefully, and then you've got this index finger along the top and guiding the blade. Anytime I was using this, by and large, I think I might have used it once in this, but by and large, this was my grip for it, and it is actually surprisingly ergonomic in that situation. It is a really nice knife for instance, cutting open boxes, that kind of thing. So the times that I used it in that domain, this worked really, really well in that grip. And so, and it's really thoughtful. I mean, it's very clear that McNees was thinking very carefully about this, and that's why this was designed in this way. It didn't make sense to me at first, now it does. So, sweet. So to me, at least, all that is the good on this guy. It is very ergonomic in that specific configuration. Actually, and the other one's not bad, too. I wonder if you can reverse grip it. Kind of. Either way. Not that you'd want to do so, but you could, I guess, right? You've got a good ergos. You got a great blade on here. You got a matching pivot, lock bar relief, and this little cutout here. You've got the drop flick action. You've got some nice smooth thumb opening if you'd like it to. The build quality is great, and just overall, it feels like a higher end piece. And actually, that to me is sort of what's great, is that this is a tiny knife by any measure. I mean, literally, this is freaking tiny. The overall length of this guy is 3.76 inches, which is less than a lot of the, maybe 3.8, okay, whatever. But this is less than a lot of knives have as their blade length. And I mean, the sharpened edge, we're coming in here at like 1.5 inches. And that's pretty small. That's going to be legal in a bunch of different places. I mean, this is not a big, and even in the thickness department, we're looking at 0.39 inches here. It's not particularly thick. And so this is a very, very small knife that's going to be legal in a lot of places and unintimidating in a lot of places. Because there were worlds. I mean, a buddy of mine, he's in IT, and he works a lot with folks, and he's always commented that, he carries these little tiny Spydercos around just for, because it won't intimidate somebody. You can open up a box, and no matter what, they won't be scared by it, so to speak. He's got other stuff around, certainly, but, these have a role in that kind of a domain. Or like the folks, I remember at an Apple store, I had some guy take out some little tiny, I think it was one of these little guys or something like that. I said, why don't you get a real knife? And he said, well, people would be intimidated by it. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can see that. And so this provides an option for that. But the thing is, even though it is tiny, even though it is very unintimidating, it still has every bit the feeling of a high-end frame lock. I mean, this really, truly is, I feel like, a brother from another mother off of the Sleesh Bowie, the Techno, the Spidey Chef. I mean, these feel like they are in a series, particularly these two. It's like, wow, natural affinity. And so to be able to have something that is just as nicely made as these high-end pieces that's going to work in pretty much any context, well, okay, I'm sorry, in any interpersonal context. There are cutting tasks this isn't going to work for, but still, that's really, really nice. And I think this provides a nice option for people who want something high-end, even though they need something very low-end in terms of size. So to me, that's what's great, is that they've made something that is both tiny and unquestionably high-end. On the bad side, to start with, of course, this is going to be too small for a lot of things. This is not necessarily your only knife in many situations. Unless you have particular laws that force this to be all you got, I mean, an 1.5 inches is not going to be a sufficient knife for a lot of cutting tasks. I mean, flat out, I cut foam on a regular basis that's deeper than this knife. That's kind of a thing. And so you want to keep that one in mind. I mean, this is very often, this could be a knife, and one nice part about this is it fits nicely in like a coin pocket, in a lot of, a key pocket in a lot of jeans and things like that. And so even if you've got something a little bit bigger in your main pocket, you can always have this guy there in case you're in the lunchroom and somebody who's just generally scared of the universe is in there and you need to open your freaking, I don't know what you're opening in the lunchroom. Your sandwich, I don't know. Either way, opening your sandwich. Do we open sandwiches? Sure. Okay, sure, why not? But anyways, I think this makes a really nice backup knife, but you do have to, of course, remember that you're going to need something a little bit bigger than this in many situations. Next thing, the blade stock on this guy feels honestly a little bit thick. I mean, it's not terrible, and honestly, but the simple fact is that having stock of this thickness makes more sense when you've got a nice, tall, full flat grind than it does in this guy where you have not as much of a full flat grind. I kind of get it, and certainly the aesthetics of it are captured well there, but it seems a little bit thick. I maybe that could have been a little bit thinner, and as a result, this will be outsliced by things like the Spyderco Ladybug, which has much, much, much thinner blade stock. So keep that in mind. Next thing, the pivot on this guy. Look, I was commenting that it is a nice detail, but the thing is the pivot on both sides is sticking out over the titanium. Now, there might be some engineering reason for this. I don't understand. But honestly, I do not particularly care for having this pivot up here prominent and also kind of beat up looking. I mean, compared to even just, nice smooth hardware like on this guy, this feels, I don't know, it's not something I'm super in love with. Maybe it's just an aesthetic touch. Maybe I shouldn't care, but it doesn't particularly do it for me. Although the matching element does make it feel more like a design choice than a, mistake or something like that. Then on the bad side, finally, this is $130. Now, look, that's a chunk of change right there. I mean, it's this or the PM2 or something like that. Now, you will absolutely be able to get better value if you're looking for an 1.5 inch knife. I mean, things like the Man Bug, Ladybug, even in the higher end sprints are absolutely cheaper than this guy. I mean, you can get, your freaking Victorinox if you want to. You can get all kinds of things for that kind of price point. This is not like stellar, oh my God, value. However, at the same time, this is really well made. I mean, the thing is, I can't point at this and say, oh, you did this wrong. There's nothing here. Actually, there's one thing that bothers me, but it's not like a fit and finish issue. It's just a design little bug. We'll talk about in the ugly, but aside from that, this is profoundly well made. Tai Chung has done a great job here. I mean, it is very clear that at some point in time, somebody at Spyderco decided, you know what? We're not going to really spare any expenses here. We're going to make this right. We're going to make the heck out of this little tiny 1.5 inch knife. And at some level, I respect that very much. But the end result of that is what a lot of people have been commenting on Instagram. It's like, whoa, that price for an 1.5 inch knife? Like, yeah, it's not a value. But at the same time, that's not what this is really about either. So, and honestly, for the fit and finish, I don't know. But the price is definitely high for a knife that's this small. I think it's not going to make sense for a lot of people to put that much money into something this small. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in the end. And so that, to me, is the bad, is that the price is definitely up there. Although, like I said, it's not entirely unearned. I'm not convinced by the rough pivot here. The blade stock is a little bit thick, and it is too small for a lot of things. On the ugly front, there is one ugly issue that kind of bothered me every time I was carrying this guy, and that is just the clip. Now, the clip itself is a fine little clip. It's on a smooth portion. There's no real issue with it there. But unfortunately, there's just not much ramp to this clip. And I get it at some level. It's a small clip. But you can see here that it doesn't protrude very far up off of the thing. But more importantly, having this pivot non-flush on this side meant that you have sort of a wall here. And so in order to get this into your pocket, what you're kind of having to do is angle the fabric of the pocket, assuming that the fabric isn't as thick as this is. angle it in such that it kind of hits perfectly so that it slides past this pivot and then into and under the clip. What this means, I mean, I was able to clip it in all situations that I tried, but it often ended up being a two-hand sort of job where I grabbed the pants pocket material to manipulate it and otherwise. This is not a straightforward, intuitive pocket clipping. Had this pivot been flush on the other side here, or even perhaps had it been smooth, or at least lower in profile, I mean, I'm looking at this kind of guy where the pivot is countersunk, I think this would have been less of an issue. I get it, like I said, maybe there were engineering concerns that made it, impossible to do that, but that was the one thing that really did bug me a little bit about this guy, is that the clipping part of it was a little bit frustrating. And I think having the combination of a low ramp and then having this little guy right there really makes it so that you have to think about reclipping this guy, and that's not great. But it held well, once it was in the pocket, it held great. So there you go. That to me is what's ugly, is that the clip, it's got some issues there. On the final conclusions front, I mean, okay, first and foremost, we have to set down functionality. If you are watching this review wanting a small knife, if you're wanting, a knife in this size range, this is not the most practical functional choice. I mean, seriously. Value-wise, you can probably do better getting like a Spyderco Ladybug or a Man Bug. Both of these are incredible knives. They cut way beyond their size implies, and they're solid. They're great. And they're a lot cheaper than this guy is, absolutely 100%. And if you're just looking for something that's utility, focused, honestly, you could get a utility knife. Just get a little tiny box cutter sort of thing. You're liable to be able to get this much blade out of it. It'll be a little bit thinner in terms of stock, and you can always throw the blade away when you're done. I mean, that's kind of weird for me to advocate, but at the same time, still, I mean, there are lots of options here for a small sort of blade with this little protrusion that's meant to cut things. So, again, you could do better than that. Or if you're just looking to slice, I mean, again, the Man Bug is an incredible freaking piece here. And so, you've got those options there. And, of course, if you're not looking for this tiny little size, you've got lots of options out there in this kind of price. I mean, seriously, this is in there. So, function-wise, no, this is probably not where I'm going to recommend you immediately if you're just looking for like, oh man, I need a good working tool. No, that's not what this is about. But the bigger question is, what is it about? I mean, it's not a gimmick, I don't think, because it actually does work. On days that I carried this, for tasks that this would be reasonable for, is a, 1.5-inch blade. It works. It's a fine little knife. It's not a novelty because, hey, it's a little pricey for a novelty. I mean, $120 is one heck of a novelty there, or 130 that is. But it's also seriously made. Usually novelties are like, okay, well, we made this silly little thing here. We got some corners. It's mostly there just for the laughs. No, this is made like a serious pocket knife. And again, I do respect that a lot. And it's not really an art knife because, well, I don't know. It doesn't have a lot of those characteristics. So, I mean, the way I end up conceptualizing this guy, I guess, is that it is a fun knife. What I mean by that is that even in the presence of other more functional, more value-focused knives, you could buy this guy just because it's bringing you some joy. It's just that there is fun there. You are taking some functional compromises. You are paying a little bit more money, but there is joy here. And there is joy because it is beautifully made. Nothing about it feels underdone. It is effective, certainly as a cutting tool for the kinds of tasks this is possible for. It's unique, it's interesting. Honestly, it's charming, and that's a weird thing to say, but it is absolutely charming. And the funny thing is, like, I had, looking at Spyderco's catalog, I'd sent them a list of, these are the things I'm interested in checking out. If you want to send them my way, I'd love to. And then this was one that I was just like, yeah, I guess, because I didn't get it initially. I looked at it, was like, that's weird. And then I got it in hand and I started using it. I actually really like it. There's a lot of joy here. I mean, it's not perfection. It's tidy, it's pricey, it's a little odd, and it's not the easiest thing to clip, but I do substantially enjoy it. For what it is doing, it is really, really neat. And I think for somebody who loves the knives in the tradition of like the Sleesh Bowie, the Techno, that kind of thing, you are going to find this enjoyable. It will be a tiny little guy that fits in that same kind of a slot. In fact, I'm going to keep this guy around on the table, so to speak, until the Techno 2 drops, because I think it'll be interesting to see the whole gang together, to get your Techno 2, your Sleesh Bowie, your Spidey Chef. Not that this is a different designer. I'm seeing Sleesh over here, and then the McNees guy, McNees over here, but still, I feel like there's a spiritual succession there. And I can, like I said, I can also see this being a great knife for somebody who needs something that is pointedly non-threatening. It's somebody you can use in a retail store, quality, a replacement for something like this that's, just barely. This is actually going to be a nice choice for that. And frankly, if you're in a position where only you can use something tiny, you can have something really excellently built and tiny, and I think that's pretty excellent. So ultimately, I'm sorry. Damn it, I screwed the pun up. The McBee or not the McBee? That is the question. And ultimately, though, that's a question that I think only you and your specific needs for the knife and your specific budget can answer. So there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you. Really charming little guy. I'm kind of happy I get to keep it around a little. Maybe we'll wait for the Techno too. That's more of an excuse than anything. I just like it a lot. I think it's cool. And yeah, hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now. Be now.